Minnesota Transportation Alliance, and welcome to Transportation Day. So we are here to highlight the importance of the transportation system and the needs of the transportation system. So as you all know, the safety and quality of our roads, bridges, transit, and other infrastructure may not be grabbing a lot of headlines, but every Minnesotan relies on the transportation system every day to live their lives. Maintaining the infrastructure that our businesses need to ship products, our workers need to do their jobs, our kids need to get to school, and our residents need to get where they need to be is a core function of government. We urge the legislature and the governor to take action during the 2023 legislative session to make the transportation system safer, stronger, and one that provides more options for all Minnesotans. As you can see from these signs that we put up, while there is a historic budget surplus in the general fund, the revenues that support transportation are not performing as well as expected. And you can see on this chart in particular what happened with the gas tax during COVID, basically crashed, but it has not come up to the levels that were anticipated. And other revenue sources, as you can see by those red numbers, are going backwards. And you're going to hear more from local governments about the fact that they are expecting to get less money in 2023 for their roads than they received in 2022, despite the record budget surplus. So on this side, we are highlighting how much transportation receives from the general fund. And on this top chart, transportation is the little orange bar that's really hard to see because that's how little general fund revenue is currently going to transportation. And so we are just wanting to highlight the fact that this is an important year. We cannot continue to go backwards in funding our transportation system. And we do have a huge opportunity this session to really make progress to catch up and keep up on our transportation system. So specifically, we're calling on the legislature and the governor to, first of all, provide state matching dollars for federal transportation funds. So for the increased funding from the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we need the state to provide the matching funds so that Minnesota can compete for those federal dollars. We are asking for one-time dollars from the budget surplus to do some catching up. We are asking for significant dedicated ongoing revenue for all jurisdictions to improve roads, bridges, and transit statewide. And to pass a robust capital investment bill with significant funding, again, for roads, transit, capital, ports and waterways, and rail projects. It will take a comprehensive transportation funding bill that both adjusts declining user fees while taking advantage of one-time dollars to finally catch up and keep up Minnesota's transportation system for the long term. We urge the legislature to make transportation funding more of a priority this session. The transportation system is an integral part of education, healthcare, job creation, business development, and environmental stewardship. Our state's economy and residents need a safer and stronger transportation system every day. And I'm now going to turn it over to Paul Austin with the Minnesota Safety Council.
Thank you, Margaret. My name is Paul Austin. I'm the president of the Minnesota Safety Council. As everybody in Minnesota knows, over the last 3 years, driving in our roads has changed dramatically. We had about 350 fatalities a year pre-COVID, and now we're up into the low 400s. It's coming down a little bit. That's good. Crashes are still up. Speed is still up. Aggressive driving is still up. So the question becomes, what can we do about it? How do we set this thing up for the future? We are here to support the asks that Margaret laid out. Maintaining our infrastructure and maintaining it for both driving and transportation speed, timeliness, as well as safety is all critical and important to link together. There are some fundamental truths about the safety side of this equation. In order to deal with any safety issue, you need to have education, engineering, and enforcement. On the engineering side, we're talking about everything from pavement quality to cable barriers to prevent crossovers, to prevent crashes on the roads. On the education side, we need to continue campaigns to encourage people to use their seatbelts. Believe it or not, seatbelt use in this state has been declining for the last half decade. It's a direct contributor to crashes. And we need to work on the enforcement side. We all saw what happened during COVID when the combination of COVID and the murder of George Floyd led to law enforcement being directed elsewhere. We didn't have the enforcement on the roads. It's starting to come back, but that needs support as well. When you go and look at the data, speed, impairment, no belts. Those are what are causing people to die in crashes. When you think about the urban-rural split, 2 out of 3 crashes occur in the metro. 3 out of 4 fatalities occur in rural areas in this state. So we need to pay just as much attention to roads in greater Minnesota as we do in the urban areas. And lastly, we need to think about vulnerable road users. We are seeing pedestrian fatalities increasing both in the state and nationally. We are seeing dramatic increases in communities of color, communities that are challenged economically, communities that have not had infrastructure investment. And we're seeing high-risk situations for workers on the roads. This is both in work zones and for other people whose business takes them into the right-of-way. So all these areas need our attention, need our investment. The opportunity is there, as Margaret said, to match state money with federal money. There are federal safety directives that come with that federal money. Let's take advantage of this right now and get it done. I'm going to pass it over to Wayne Sandberg.
Thank you, Paul. As was stated, my name is Wayne Sandberg. I serve as the county engineer for Washington County, Minnesota. Minnesotans deserve safe roads and bridges and the ability to connect safely to work and services. The latest infrastructure report card from the American Society of Civil Engineers gives Minnesota roads a D+, our bridges a C grade, and our transit service a C-. We believe Minnesota can and should do better. However, unless action is taken, counties in Minnesota, as Margaret mentioned, will receive less state funding in 2023 from the Highway Trust Fund than we received in 2022. In a year with a historic state surplus, it makes no sense for local governments to receive a cut in the state funding that we plan to use to fix our roads and bridges. Thanks to supply chain issues and other impacts from the pandemic, transportation user fees like license tab fees and motor vehicle sales taxes are down from what we projected earlier. We rely heavily on these fees to take care of our roads and bridges. The legislature needs to explore ways to shore up these dedicated user fees so they can continue to support our transportation system into the future. Minnesota has thousands of bridges. Most of them are under the jurisdiction of counties, cities, and townships. We have a growing backlog of structurally deficient local bridges, and that is only growing due to the lack of a capital bonding bill last session. Local governments also have jurisdiction over most of the miles of roadway in our state, and as that system ages, we are struggling to keep up with the maintenance of these roads. A major capital bonding bill is needed this year and every year to provide predictable funding assistance for local roads and bridges so we can keep our residents safe and our businesses thriving. Now I'd like to invite up Ryan Daniel to the podium.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Daniel. I'm the CEO of St. Cloud Metrobus and also president of the Minnesota Public Transportation Association. Thousands of Minnesotans rely on bus service all across Minnesota in order to get to work, to school, to medical appointments, and to other important destinations. This critical service provides a lifeline for people in transit to remain independent and to get where they need to go to live their lives. Especially in greater Minnesota, there are fewer options for people to get around, and public transit plays a key role in creating livable communities. From Minneapolis and St. Paul to the suburbs, to the regional centers like St. Cloud, to very rural areas, transit systems are there to keep communities moving. Ridership is growing and demand is up, but costs are also up for transit systems. The cost of buses, the cost of fuel, workforce issues that are all widespread, all contribute to the challenges communities face in keeping buses on the road and expanding service to meet the needs of Minnesotans in all parts of the state. In addition, transit systems are changing and adapting to the new world. We are exploring options like microtransit and changing our fleets to buses that run on electricity or other alternative fuels to meet new environmental goals. We are working to create sustainable, effective transit systems that serve the needs of Minnesotans. That requires stable, ongoing funding from all levels of government, federal, state, and local. We urge the legislature to increase the state's investment and work with transit systems throughout the state to improve the bus service Minnesotans need every day. Where transportation goes, the community grows. Now, I will pass it on to Mr. Mark Linger.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Lingard, and I'm here from Grand Rapids. I'm very proud to be here to represent my trade union brothers and sisters as a member of Laguna Local 1097. My fellow laborers and I are proud to put our skills to use, building and fixing roads, bridges, transit infrastructure to provide a high quality of life to our friends and neighbors. This is my third year in the union, and I wish I would have known about it sooner. I enjoy being in the outdoors. Working outside in the summer surrounded by heavy machinery is great. As a laborer, I am able to care for myself, my wife, to whom I've been married for over a year. Because of this job, I am able to support her as she works for a nonprofit organization that helps employ adults with disabilities. She can focus on the mission of her job rather than being worried about the money, and we are thankful for that. As a young adult, I made bad choices that affected my record, and I was a struggling alcoholic and addict. I'm proud to say I've been in recovery for 12 years and have found great satisfaction in helping others in their recovery and volunteering with the disability community. Even with the positive changes in my life, working in the trades is my best option as it provides me with benefits I could not get elsewhere. Being a union laborer gives me a livable wage, medical insurance, and fair pay for the work. I also know that when I'm out there working, whether it's flagging or removing steel culverts as I did on County Road 4, the crew I'm working with is doing high quality, safe, and professional construction work. We're trained properly through the state-of-the-art apprenticeship program that our members receive for free. Nevertheless, I do not take working out in the elements for granted, and safety is number one. Flagging is dangerous, even when I've been fully geared in high visibility PPE. Cars fly by and drivers may not see me. Workers are doing our part to keep each other and passerby safe, but investments in our roads, bridges, and transit will help prevent traffic accidents involving workers. Our lawmakers have the duty to do the right thing this session and pass a comprehensive transportation funding package. Fixing Minnesota's infrastructure provides careers and opportunities for thousands of people across the state, many men and women like me who have limited options for employment. Having work available and a job that I'm proud of helps me build my future. Professionals in the transportation industry take pride in our work, while we contribute to the state's economy and growth. We know our work helps people get home safely to their families. Thank you, and I'd like to welcome Representative Ornstein.
Thank you so much to the Minnesota Transportation Alliance and all of the advocates that are gathered here and on this Transportation Day, an annual day, but there's a sense of urgency this year. We absolutely have to catch up and keep up. We have not passed a substantial transportation bill since 2008, and even that bill was a bit of a compromise from its original version when it was passed off of the House and Senate floors that year. Federal money is significant and important, and we will match that. There's a huge general fund surplus, and we will likely be able to access that. But federal money and the surplus are simply not enough to keep up with our growing and urgent needs to fix our roads, our bridges, and our transit systems. and to create a transportation system that is truly for the 21st century. We know what works. Transportation and good quality public transit are the key to our economic future. They are the key to lifting people up out of poverty. They are the key to addressing our climate crisis, as transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, it is an equity investment that will pay off for generations to come. So in the transportation committees, in the House and Senate, we are grappling with these issues. And we intend to put together a transportation bill that will rival and exceed what we did in 2008. A historic transportation bill to meet our needs, a bold transportation bill to really move Minnesota into the 21st century when it comes to fixing our crumbling infrastructure. As a candidate and now governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer once said, "It's time to fix the damn roads." And I will add, and transit systems. So with that, we would welcome any questions to any of us that are here.
I'll go.
This is Mr. Callahan's seat. I saw him here earlier today in that very seat.
Are you closer to having your funding package finalized? And can you talk a little bit about what you're looking as far as that?
Yeah, we are moving into a phase now where we're wrapping up a number of policy bills and other very important items. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a big bill on transit safety. Friday, the NLX line to Duluth, I would add passenger rail as a key part of a 21st century transportation system. And then we'll be really looking at putting together our funding package, and probably the 3rd week of March have that ready, and then pass out of committee the 4th week of March.
Okay. And maybe to whoever wants to play with this, when you say you support increased revenues and ongoing revenues, do you have specific ideas as to what, or are you deferring to the chair on how to do it?
I know the Transportation Alliance has an
Okay,
agenda,
first, you
so,
can-
yeah.
Yes, well, we have what we like to say is an all of the above kind of agenda. We've laid out a lot of different funding options, because we know there are a lot of options. Certainly the revenue sources that are constitutionally dedicated are the ones that we think have the best potential to help us out long-term. But there are other options too. We look all over the country at what is happening. There are some new ideas out there, like delivery fees, for example. But, you know, generally people think that user fees are fair, that the more people use the system, the more they should contribute to it. But we think it will always take a combination of different revenue sources, one-time money, bonding, all sorts of different things that all come together, because there's no panacea. There's no one source that's gonna take care of the problem when it's this large.
Okay. State gasoline tax, is that one of them?
We always support that. It's not always one that gets a lot of political support, but we think it makes sense because it is a user fee and it's constitutionally dedicated. But we know that there has to be other options on the table as well.
And Chair Bernstein, your ideas about a sales tax, a transit sales tax in the metro doesn't help St. Cloud very much. How do you get money out to that?
Well, I will say that, I'll answer that, but I want to preface this by saying a good transportation bill, and one that my transportation mentor, Representative Bernie Leader, may rest in peace, always would say, is that a good transportation bill covers all modes in all parts of the state. And so you're correct, Peter. We envision a metro sales tax for this region, but I was just in a meeting with a number of transit advocates from greater Minnesota, and they have really critical and urgent needs as well. And so we will include in our bill robust funding for greater Minnesota transit. on an ongoing basis. I think it's really important that while there is one-time money potentially available, we need to make sure, again, whether it's roads, bridges, the transit system in the metro area, the transit system in greater Minnesota, has that long-term dedicated funding so that we're not just going from one year to another, falling behind, which we really have. And so that's why I think the catch-up, keep-up moniker is very appropriate. So yes, we do plan to meet the needs in greater Minnesota, because whether it's St. Cloud or Duluth or the dial-a-ride services that we have in many parts of the state, you know, those are struggling as well.
Anybody else? Because I can ask one more. Again, anybody who wants to take this question, how do you break through what you mentioned, this concept? People hear about 17.5 billion surplus, they think there's a surplus, that's all it's talked about is a surplus. They maybe don't know that there are separate funding sources and separate budgeting for transportation areas, and I'm gonna guess it would surprise them to hear that those are going in the opposite direction of the general fund. How do you break through that sort of message that people maybe don't get? Is it disconnect perhaps?
Yeah, I think that is really true, and I think we always struggle with infrastructure in general to get attention. It's not an issue that a lot of people pay attention to until it doesn't work. But yeah, I think trying to get people to understand the user fees that do support the system. I think when you talk about the impacts of COVID, the impacts of supply chain problems, people kind of intuitively get it, that, oh yeah, there weren't a lot of cars out there to buy, and the cost really went up, and so people stopped leasing motor vehicles, and they stopped buying a lot of new cars. Everybody sort of made do with what they had. I think people do kind of get it when you talk about it in those terms, that we are still trying to recover from the impact of the pandemic, and those kinds of revenue sources just are not performing the way that we expected them to.
But some of them are recovering, but others aren't, even though the effects you just mentioned have eased.
Yeah, although I think the supply chain problems are still somewhat of an issue. We know, especially in transit, buses have become really difficult to buy and much more expensive just in the last year. And so we're still kind of waiting for that to ease.
All good?
Yep.
Friends of the media? All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone for coming.
Thank you.